connecting security solutions with security leaders. Security you should know starts now.
Welcome to Security You Should Know. I'm your host, Rich Straffolino. Today, we're talking with ActiveState and learning what they're doing in the software supply chain security category. Very hot space. If you listen to cybersecurity headlines, you know this should be top of mind for you. If it's not, I have some bad news for you. The problem that they're addressing is the increase in exploitability that we've seen in the open source supply chain. Again, should be top of mind for everybody at this point. Helping us figure out why this is a problem and how ActiveState is trying to solve it are Doug Mayer, VP and CISO over at WCG, and Howard Holton, the former CEO at GigaOM. Doug, I'm going to start with you. Why are we seeing this increase in exploitability, and why is it all of a sudden seem like it's just this dominant problem that we're seeing? Is it just AI's here, deal with it?
No, I don't think it's AI's here, deal with it, but it's AI's here, deal with it much quicker now.
Oh.
Yeah, so open source has always been around. Open source does have a little bit of a lag when it comes to remediating vulnerabilities. So having open source security helps enable, first of all, one, developers don't have to rebuild something they can borrow. And that's the whole value of open source. But number two, you can at least have some level of confidence that multiple people have used it, have addressed it. Some people actually adapt it, but at least the source is very reputable. But AI is now making this window that things are vulnerable much more aggressively, and there's much more vulnerabilities being discovered.
All right, Howard, same question for you. The exploitability in the open source supply chain, why is all of a sudden this the topic of the day?
So I think there's probably three things at work here, right? The first is open source is public. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're slower to remediate. What it means is it's more public when anything happens, and anyone can fork an open source project, inject malicious code. And if you're not paying attention, it's really, really easy to kind of get compromised. Second, there's a tremendous amount of increased velocity due to AI. And the velocity is on both sides, right? The velocity is the velocity of the malicious attacker or the malintentioned to compromise open source projects, but also the velocity within software development has increased. And let's be really clear, I pay my software developers to be fast, right? Like no one's reinventing TypeScript. They're downloading the library. No one's, you know what I mean? We're not recreating these things. We're leaning on projects that others have already kind of leaned into and found. The software supply chain is a problem because these things are also built by developers who are paid to go fast as well. They're there to solve the development problem, not the security problem. And so the big plus and kind of the third piece is security has become a priority for every organization in the last 10 years, let's say. I'll be generous and say 10 years, where before it really wasn't. We were much more whimsical in our security practice. And now we have people that are actually focusing on security, both good and bad, within the open source space. And because of this velocity, it's much harder to know what you can trust, what you should trust, and what is just not possible to trust. And so we really need someone injected in the middle there to say, hey, our entire focus is security and trust within this space. Use us as a broker or use us as a validator to help you make better decisions so you make fewer poor ones.
All right, today we are super lucky to get to talk to Abby Kearns, the CEO at ActiveState. Now to start out, Abby, we need some help with three essential questions here. How do I explain the value of your solution to my CEO? What does your solution do? What does it not do? And what is the pricing model? Can you help us out here?
Absolutely. ActiveState delivers 95% fewer CVEs reaching production, and it's 90% faster at remediation, which this is against a 140-day industry average. And we do that by building your open source from verified sources instead of public registries. We secure open source at the point it enters your pipeline, not a scanner, not a report, but a trusted, verified, and continuously remediated source. We do not replace your scanners. We sit upstream so there's less for them to find, cutting false positive noise by 68%. Finally, pricing is a tiered pricing model that's dimensioned by both language library and the size of the organization. So with a 4 to 8 developer hours reclaimed per CVE, it basically pays for itself in engineering capacity alone.
All right, lots there. Fantastic. I cannot wait to dig into this. So, Howard, I'm going to start with you. What other questions do you have for Abby and for ActiveState?
Well, because I pay my team to move fast and I'm integrating AI more and more into my development workflow, there's kind of two pieces to this that I think are really important. The first is because of the use of AI, because of the increased velocity, because of our kind of shift in focus and change in workflows, there are an awful lot of new libraries that I'm finding are incredibly useful, right? And there's a change in velocity within the open source space. So how does ActiveState maintain a velocity that doesn't create more friction, doesn't create more slowdown, and doesn't make my developers want to go around the process because you're not approving things fast enough, because you're not certifying things fast enough, whatever term you'd like to use?
Well, we do that easily by providing a catalog replacement for the package manager. So instead of pulling from NPM, Maven, PyPy directly, we provide a catalog with all of your packages, dependencies, and transitive dependencies necessary for your language of choice. And the developers pull directly from there, and it can be dropped directly into your CI/CD pipeline or your repo of choice. A common pattern is JFrog's Artifactory or Sonatype Nexus or Cloudsmith, whatever you're using to store those packages in. But it's just giving you a new source for those language libraries rather than pulling them directly from package managers.
All right, Doug, I need you to jump in here. What other questions do you have about ActiveState?
You just triggered a good question for me. So what's preventing me from doing Cloudsmith's tool to find the vulnerabilities, or JFrog's Artifactory tool to say there's vulnerabilities? Like, what is it? What are you doing differently? Because they do offer components there.
They do. We're, I would say, a little bit upstream from them, which is we'll let you start secure and we maintain that catalog of secure languages and packages. We allow you to start secure and they will help you stay secure, which is the scanning, the complete verification. Once you pull that through your pipeline, you should still continue to do all of that. But at the end of the day, you want to be able to start secure and really have confidence that the packages you're pulling in and those transitive dependencies, and I keep mentioning transitive dependencies because that's where a lot of this new malware is coming in. And it allows you to just have a much more secure starting point, and then you continue to maintain that security throughout your pipeline.
So just a follow-up question to that. So if my group's building an AI SDLC, kind of going further left to the pipeline than you traditionally would do with an AI-assisted environment, how are you fitting in over there then?
It's just replacing where you pull your packages from, that's all. It's like today, if you're using AI, any AI code generator, you're pulling packages directly from package managers. If you look and pay close attention to what your Cloud Code or Cursor or Codex is pulling from, it's largely NPM, PyPy, Maven, wherever those packages are, or beyond those package managers, maybe some esoteric library that sits out there that doesn't even go through those package managers. And so that's where a lot of the security and the vulnerability is being introduced, is there are no guardrails around any of that. It's basically, it is, for better or worse, it is the wild, wild west. And so what we're trying to do is help you provide a secure wrapping on that. So basically, what we do is we pull those packages down, we scan them, we rebuild them in a secure SLSA 3 attested environment. We provide full SBOM and VEX attestation. Then we scan that all again and we provide that to you in a secure way. So we validated and made sure that it's secure, and then we maintain that. So once there's updates in the upstream, we'll pull that updated package down and we'll do that process all over again. But it allows you to start secure and then continue to stay secure throughout the pipeline.
Right. So what happens if I request a package that's not in your database, that's not in your marketplace, that's not in your catalog?
We can add that for you.
And what does that look like?
You just request the package and we'll go and add that to the collection. We've got a ton of components already, but we're constantly adding more as customers come up on, like, they're using some kind of specific package to a specific language. For example, Java, there's an unlimited number of those options. But also with Python, it all depends. If you're writing ML code, perhaps you've got specific components that you pull in to do your software development, like a scikit or a NumPy or pandas. So we'll just add those components for you.
Is it automated? As in, you notice when I make a request that the package is missing, and then you add it? Do I open a ticket? Like, I'm what I'm trying to wrap my arms around it is really around the friction component of the process, right? Because once the package is in the catalog, it makes complete sense. But it's really the friction around. There's probably 15 things I find out about every week that I was completely unaware of, some of which went through an update and went from not useful to useful, right? I never would have considered them to now I'm considering them, right? It got 30,000 stars in the last week, kind of garbage. And I still need a way to tell my developers that they have access to these things. And I'm not adding undue friction while at the same time making sure that we're secure. So that's really, I'm just trying to get a measurement of what does that process look like and what is the quantification of that friction?
Well, I think it depends on the package, obviously, and how esoteric it is. But, we would want to do the same process, which is to pull that down, rebuild it from source, rebuild it in a secure environment, and then deliver that into your catalog of choice. So it depends on the package, but that can be same day to a couple of days. It just depends. But we want to give time to actually have a little bit of a quarantine and scan and do the rebuild process. But the build process is all automated.
So Checkmarx and those other products are now looking to bring in AI BOM so they can help find shadow AI. Do you have that in your roadmap to say that, you're putting in SBOM? How are you addressing that problem? Because there's a clear problem that further to the left, and then you can't trust that source. It seems like there's an opportunity here to go beyond SBOM. Do you have that in your roadmap?
Well, I would say today with our catalog, you get a full SBOM. Now, what I think you're asking is a more complicated question. So again, ActiveState's focused on language libraries. But I think what you're asking for is how are we managing the full SBOM for the collection of solutions and services that we're pulling in? Because as I suspect you're well aware, some of the new malware that has been injected in, if the malware that has taken advantage of the AI software supply chain is now coming in with full provenance, full attestation as part of the malware. And it's a little tricky, which is why services like ours become more important, because the scanners aren't detecting those. They're not being identified further down the supply chain because they look fine. And so that's where services like ActiveState, the ability where we particularly focus on the language libraries, we pull everything in and rebuild it and then provide you that SBOM and that VEX attestation so that when you're doing the scanning later, you have the ability to do checks and balances against that and start to look at drift and deviation. I would say shadow AI is obviously a bigger problem, which is what accounts are people using? What are they connecting to? How are we managing the data that they're connected to? And how are we moderating that? And I think that is a bigger solution beyond just addressing the security of language libraries and packages. And I think there's a lot of tooling that is being developed right now, but I think we're, as a industry, really trying to figure that out in real time.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, I also like that answer because it seems like everyone is taking huge bites at things that assume we've solved things that we haven't solved, and we've not solved the SBOM problem yet, right? We've not solved software security and software supply chain security in even the smallest way yet. So I'm glad you're not seeming to bite off more than you can chew.
No, it's a huge problem. We've been talking about SBOMs for years, and I personally thought that we would start taking this as an industry a lot more seriously several years ago when, during the Biden era, when that new regulation came around, that if you sell software to anything that impacts the government, there has to be full SBOM and full attestation. And that never really took off. We talked about it, and it was a nice to have. And I think largely if you go organization by organization and ask them, give me a list of all of the packages, all of the components that are in all of your software, I think every organization would really struggle with that.
I mean, that harkens back to Sarbanes-Oxley, right? As someone that went through SOX, the rule became we don't follow any regulatory cost until we see the penalty.
Well, absolutely. Now, I think where we'll all be watching is to see what the ramifications are from the EU CRA. So the first wave of that goes into effect in September of this year. That's more around notification. But by December of 27 is when the full SBOM attestation is going to be required and penalized. And that, I think, will be interesting to your point about Sarbanes-Oxley or, more recently, the GDPR push. I think that will be really interesting to see what the ramifications are with that.
Yeah, and for those that haven't been paying attention, in the first year of GDPR going into effect, the penalties levied were greater than the entire history of HIPAA. And by like a big multiple, it wasn't even close. So I do think this is a place people should pay attention. So I just want to get one clarifying point. I think I know the answer, but one kind of clarifying question. When we're talking about the catalog that is maintained by ActiveState, and me as a subscriber to the ActiveState service, does the catalog that I inherit, is that a catalog of things I have specifically approved, or is that the entire catalog that ActiveState has certified and maintained?
It is your catalog. We have components that are essentially upstream to that, a collection of components that we build and maintain, but your catalog is specific and unique to your environment. And so it includes the languages that are important for you, Python, Go, .NET, Rust, whatever those languages are, as well as the packages, the dependencies, and the transitive dependencies.
Okay.
All right, Abby, what's one thing we didn't ask about that we need to know?
I think that we're all talking about AI and we're all talking about the velocity and the speed of software development. But I do think that open source writ large is in the midst of a pretty massive transformation. And so we touched on it a little bit, and I, just because I can't help myself, put a finer point on it, which is to say AI is helping us identify more CVEs than ever before. Thanks, AI. It's also helpfully creating more PRs for those upstream projects. However, that's running against the fact that most of these open source projects, and I'm talking about the things that fundamentally allow us to operate any technology, are largely being maintained by a very tiny number of humans. And most of them, this is not their full-time job. And so we're running up against both a massive exponential, like power law exponential identification of CVEs and helpful PRs that are AI generated, but they're being funneled through a tiny number of upstream contributors and maintainers. And that, I think, is going to be very interesting to see how that plays out over the next 6 to 12 months, because we're essentially going to have a whole bunch of known CVEs and not enough people to address those CVEs.
All right, well, that's just about it for this episode of Security You Should Know. To learn more, head on over to ActiveState.com. And if you have any feedback about this show, send it to us, feedback@CISOseries.com. Thanks to Doug and Howard for helping us learn more about what ActiveState is doing and this very interesting moment that we are in when it comes to the open source supply chain. I think just a fantastic conversation here. And thank you, Abby, for your time and being game to answer all of these questions. And thank you for listening to Security You Should Know.
That wraps up another episode of Security You Should Know. If you like this program, please subscribe, tell your friends, and leave us a review. All companies showcased on this program are sponsors of CISO Series. If your company would like to be spotlighted and interviewed by our security leaders, go to our contact page on CISOseries.com or just email us at info@CISOseries.com. Thank you for listening to Security You Should Know, connecting security solutions with security leaders.